Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2, chapter 2 of my Fire Emblem 6 hard mode chapter guide. Today we're going to be talking about, well, the aforementioned chapter 2. So let's get right into it. Initially, we're going to be getting two brand new units. The first one is Ellen, who's an early healer. Ellen's amazing. Her healing, her base magic is quite bad, which is pretty much the only stat that matters on a healer. So that's unfortunate, but healing is just amazing. So she's great. In comparison to the other starting healers, which is Clarion and Saul, which we'll be getting a bit later, she is the worst one. She doesn't have the mobility of Clarion or the magic of Saul, but I mean, she's great. Doesn't really matter that much. She can heal. That's what's most important. Highly recommend using her. We're also going to be getting Merlinus. So Merlinus is a really interesting unit in this game. He is the thing that gives us access to our convoy. Unlike his other appearance in Fire Emblem 7, where he's stationary, in this game, you have to use a deployment slot on him, and he can move around. So he's really frail. But Merlinus is, I think, kind of an underrated unit because he's extremely unique in sort of the annals of Fire Emblem history. Because it's really rare that you get a character that can, like, die indefinitely. I mean, he could die in every single chapter, and you'll still just get him again and again and again. You don't lose anything. So he's not going to be able to give you any combat, obviously, or survive more than, like, a couple of hits at most. But seriously, really, really unique in the grand scheme of Fire Emblem games, and actually a pretty amazing unit. He also, of course, gives you access to your convoy, which is some nice utility. You're going to be able to use him for free for these first handful of chapters, and then you'll have to use a deployment slot on him, which I don't really that often, but it's some nice utility that he provides. So I just wanted to touch on that. Um, so the early part of this chapter, as I said, is fairly straightforward. You're going to want to be getting Lance and Allen kills, experience levels, those sorts of things that we talked about. There is a fun little movement thing that you can do on the first turn of this chapter. So there's a lot of these things. If you play Fire Emblem a lot, you may sort of get used to some ways to sort of cheese parts, things like that. It's not super important that you do this, but I'm going to touch on it here. So basically what you do is you're going to want to move Marcus to the left of the starting soldier just to the south, and then kill that soldier, and then you can rescue Marcus, and then rescue drop him with one of the calves to the south. So you rescue him to his right, and then down below, and then you can drop him onto the fort. Now, again, not super important that you do this, but it's a nice little movement tech. Marcus cannot get to the fort even if you kill the soldier because he doesn't have quite enough movement. But the nice thing about being in the fort is that there's a couple of fighters just outside of the fort that now can't sort of get in at your other units, and also a fighter won't stand on the fort on the enemy phase first turn. So it's a nice little movement tech that you can do. It helps your weaker units kind of handle the units behind him, and then he can get some chip damage and sort of barrier the other fighters. But the first part of the chapter, whether you do that or not super complicated. Just a couple of units in front of you. Then we're going to be getting 4 new units, and that's Deke, who's a mercenary, 2 fighters in Wade and Lot, and then a Pegasus Knight in Thani. So these units are actually pretty good. Deke is definitely the best of these units, especially right now. He is a mercenary with actually very strong stats. He has enough bulk to take hits, which is pretty rare on this team, considering pretty much only Marcus can do that. He's can sometimes double early on. He's quite the good unit. As you progress through the game, I do think he falls off a decent amount, so I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend using him forever, but Hero's a good class, and he does have really good stats, especially for this stage in the game. Next up, we have Thani, who's our starting Pegasus Knight. I'm not a big fan of Pegasus Knights, and this game is really no different. Her combat is not particularly good. Her constitution means she kind of gets weighed down by stuff. This is sort of maybe one of my more controversial from opinions in general. I really like Vanessa from Sacred Stones, but I'm not a big fan of Thani from this game. I just don't think she provides enough. So you certainly can use her. Obviously, the ability to fly is quite nice, but I generally do not train her. I'm usually disappointed by her. Then we have Lot and Wade. So Lot is actually a pretty solid unit. Axes in this game have atrocious hit, so I'm not the biggest fan of the world of training axe users. And Lot's stats are... Lot has pretty good bulk, which is nice, and his speed is enough to not get doubled, and he hits pretty hard. But his growths are just kind of like okay. Warrior's an okay class, not spectacular, although the ability to use bows in this game is quite nice. But he's really nice early on. Wade, on the other hand, is absolutely atrocious. His starting speed is so bad, he'll get doubled very quickly, and that won't stop throughout the game. Would not recommend trading him, although he can give you some decent utility early on. So the biggest thing about these characters, and this is probably going to be pretty obvious, to anyone playing. There are forts right in front of them. My recommendation is to put Deke and Lot on 2 of the forts and just defend against the enemies that come. They both should be fine. I mean, hypothetically, you can get hit by everything, but Void with the forts and the decent defense of the 2 units should be okay. You can maybe get some kills for Thani here if you do want to train her. It's not that difficult to do. And then just move Marcus and Alan over there. And then there's a few units close to the boss that won't move, and you can kind of deal with them. Again, it depends on sort of who you want to train here. Highly recommend getting more and more kills for Lance and Alan. It's going to be really important for the next section of the game. The other thing is, of course, the boss. How are we killing the boss? It's actually kind of annoying. My recommendation is to get the armor slayer that is from the house to the north with Merlinus, and then send Thani over there, pick it up, and you can either give it to Deke or Marcus to use. I mean, hypothetically, I believe the armor slayer is C in this game, so it's really hard for Lance or Alan to be able to do it. Roy can maybe do something here, but Roy's not particularly strong, and the rapier doesn't have the effective damage that the armor slayer does. It kind of depends on whether you want to use the armor slayer or the sliver lance. Both are really, really useful for the next handful of chapters. My recommendation is to armor slayer with Deke because I think his levels are more useful than Marcus's. But you can really decide on however you want to handle this. But yeah, and that's the end of the chapter. So again, I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see you in chapter 3.